That night, I opened the door to the lake house, the one still in my name, and found my daughter-in-law directing movers to haul my furniture onto the porch. "You can leave now," she said, not even blinking. I smiled, set my briefcase on the counter, hit play, and let everyone hear her voice from last week once the papers are signed. She's just a visitor. Then the doorbell rang. The process server was right on time. "My name is Marjorie Hale. I am 67 years old. I've been a widow for nearly 2 decades, and I am the proprietor of the Hale Lakeside Retreat, a small, successful getaway I built from nothing on the rocky shores of Vermont. I am known for being independent, and perhaps too quiet. But I have learned that quiet people see things others miss. Tonight, that quiet was my armor. It was late, past 9 o'clock, and a cold drizzle was settling in. A large, unfamiliar moving truck was parked on the gravel driveway of my private lake house. This wasn't the retreat. This was my sanctuary, the home I'd bought with the last of my husband's life insurance. The truck's headlights cut harsh beams through the mist, illuminating the mess on my front porch. My belongings were stacked haphazardly. My grandmother's reading chair, the solid oak chest my husband had built, my framed collection of pressed lake flora. Taped carelessly to the arm of the chair was a bright orange sticker, the kind you get at a dollar store. Scrawled on it in thick black marker was a single word, "Donate." She stepped out of the open doorway, framed by the light from the foyer. My daughter-in-law. She had been Kendra Ann when my son Ryan first brought her home, a name she deemed too plain. She now insisted on being called Avery Sinclair, a name that sounded like it belonged on the spine of a bad airport novel. She wasn't looking at me. She was directing the 2 movers, young men in matching grey uniforms who looked tired and wet. "That chest goes next," she commanded, pointing. "Just get everything loaded. We don't have all night." I cleared my throat. The sound was small, but it cut through the damp air. "Avery." She turned. Her expression was not surprise, but sharp annoyance, as if I were a stubborn stain she couldn't scrub out. Her face, usually arranged in a mask of pleasant hospitality for her Boston friends, was pulled tight with undisguised authority. "Marjorie," she said, her voice flat and cold. She glanced at the movers, who had stopped, and then back at me. "You can leave now. We have this handled." "We." The audacity of the word hung in the air. I looked past her, into the home I had paid for in cash, and saw only a stranger giving orders. My son, Ryan, was nowhere to be seen. He was, as always, handled. I ignored the familiar sting of betrayal. Panic is a luxury. After all these years running a business, I knew that facts are a weapon. I walked past her, my practical boots silent on the wet stone path. She tensed, but did not move to stop me. I stepped over my own threshold, onto the slate tile I had laid myself. I walked to the granite kitchen island, the one I'd had quarried just last year, and set my old leather briefcase on its polished surface. The 2 brass latches clicked open, the sound echoing in the strained silence. I did not pull out the stack of papers I knew was inside. Not yet. I simply took out my phone and placed it face down on the counter, next to the briefcase. The stage was set. The rain began to tap harder against the windows. The porch light, rattled by the wind, started to flicker, buzzing erratically. It cast long, unstable shadows across Avery's face. The 2 movers were standing on the porch, holding opposite ends of my antique sideboard. They looked at me, standing calmly in the kitchen, and then at Avery, rigid in the doorway. They looked at each other. Their confusion was a tangible thing. This was not a standard eviction. They were caught in a domestic crossfire, unsure who held the deed and who was trespassing. "Ma'am?" one of them finally asked, his voice cracking. He directed the question into the empty space between us. "You want this loaded, or—" "I told you to load it," Avery snapped. "I'm the owner," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried. "And I'm telling you to put it down." They obeyed me. They set the sideboard down on the damp porch boards with a heavy, definitive thud. Avery's eyes narrowed. "You have no authority here anymore." I held her gaze, the steady calm of a 67-year-old woman facing the frantic energy of a usurper. I turned my back to her, a deliberate, calculated dismissal, and picked up my phone. I speed-dialed 1. Jules, my sharp young receptionist at the retreat, answered on the second ring. "Jules," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "It's Marjorie. Is Plan B confirmed and ready?" There was a brief pause. "Yes, ma'am. He's on standby, just like you asked. Should I send him—" "Give him 5 minutes," I said. "Thank you." I ended the call and placed the phone back on the counter. Avery was practically vibrating with anger. "What are you doing?" "Calling the police. They can't help you. This is a civil matter." "I'm not calling the police, dear," I said, finally opening the briefcase. At that exact moment, as if summoned by my words, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, two-tone chime that sliced through the tension and the sound of the rain. Avery visibly flinched. The movers froze. I looked at Avery and allowed myself a small, tight smile. The process server was punctual. I watched the blood drain from her face as she finally began to understand who, exactly, was in control of the house still under my name. As the chime echoed, I didn't move toward the door. I let her. I let her stand there, trapped between the past I was about to recite and the future she was about to lose. My mind went back, as it often did, to the origin of all of this. It started 8 years ago. My husband, David, passed, and the silence in our Albany apartment was too heavy to bear. It was a good apartment, but it was theirs. I was just me. So I sold it. I sold the life we had, took the money, and drove north to Vermont until I found a 5-acre patch of wild, overgrown land on a lake that no one wanted. It had potential. That's what I told the bank. They saw mud and mosquitoes. I saw sunrises and a dock. I built the Hale Lakeside Retreat from that mud. My mornings started at 5 a.m., not with coffee on a quiet porch, but with binders. I learned to navigate the labyrinth of building permits, septic system codes, and commercial zoning laws. I learned how to spackle drywall until my shoulders burned. I painted all 14 rooms of the first lodge wing myself, a shade of calm blue that I'd mixed in a bucket. While the paint dried, I sat at a card table with a laptop, teaching myself online booking management and search engine optimization. I was too busy building a life to mourn the one I'd lost. Then came Avery, my son. Ryan Hale, a good boy, a kind boy, who had unfortunately inherited my husband's tendency to avoid conflict, brought her home. She was Kendra Ann then, a nervous girl with sharp eyes. But she came from a family in Boston that valued what they called social standards, and my worn work boots and direct, no-nonsense way of speaking did not meet that standard. From the day they married, She began her quiet campaign. She wasn't just Kendra Ann anymore. She was Avery Sinclair, a name she felt had more weight. My name, Hale, was apparently not good enough for her, though it was fine for my son. Our family dinners, when they happened, became inspections. Avery, who had never worked a day of manual labor, would pick at the food I'd cooked. "Marjorie," she'd say, "the standard for a dinner party salad fork is placement outside the main fork." Or, "A linen napkin is really the only acceptable choice. Don't you think?" I would look at Ryan. I would wait. He would just stare at his plate, swirling his food, and say, "Avery, please." "What?" she'd counter. All innocence. "I'm just trying to help your mother. Presentation matters." He would sigh and fall silent. He always chose silence. He called it keeping the peace. I called it letting the wolf guard the henhouse. His silence was a permission slip. So, I stopped hosting. I withdrew, pouring every ounce of energy and every dollar I earned back into the retreat. It paid off. I expanded to 14 rooms. The Vermont Travel and Living magazine gave me a full-page feature, calling the retreat a hidden gem of authentic luxury. My bookings were solid for 6 months out. I had created something valuable, something real, and the more successful the retreat became, the less I saw of my son. For 3 straight years, he visited only on the requisite holidays, and even then, his eyes were always on Avery, gauging her mood. My birthday congratulations, which used to be a long, rambling phone call, became a 3-sentence email. The success felt hollow when I had no one to share it with. So 2 years ago, I bought this house. It's 5 miles down the lake from the retreat, completely separate. It's not part of the business. It's not an asset for Ryan to inherit. I bought it with my own money, and it is titled in my name, and my name alone. It was my sanctuary, my place to breathe, the one piece of ground in the world that was mine, where no one could judge the placement of my salad fork. And it was this house, my spiritual inheritance, the one thing I had kept sacredly for myself, that my daughter-in-law was now standing in, trying to give my things away, as if I were already dead. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. The doorbell rang again, sharper this time. Avery stared at the door, her manufactured composure finally cracking. She thought this was a spontaneous arrival. She thought I was reacting to her. She was wrong. I was not reacting. I was executing. This night was not her victory. It was an ambush, one I had been meticulously planning for 3 weeks. It all started quietly, as the most dangerous things do. It started with paperwork, not with shouting. I was in my office at the retreat, the small room smelling of old wood and the coming rain, preparing to pay the utility bills for this lake house. I logged into the Vermont Electric account. My eyes scanned the dashboard, and I froze. The billing address was correct, but the secondary name listed on the account, just below mine, was not A. Sinclair. My pulse quickened. I began to dig. It took less than 10 minutes to navigate the account's message history, a feature most people ignore. There it was. A request, sent 2 weeks prior from an email address I did not recognize. Per the owner's request, it read, "Please add Avery Sinclair as an authorized manager on this account and update the mailing address for all correspondence." They had been sloppy. My original address was still listed as primary, but the arrogance of the request, the casual insertion of her chosen name onto my private property, it was a declaration. That was the first thread. The second appeared in my physical mailbox at the retreat 2 days later. It was not an invoice. It was a receipt, marked "Paid in Full." It was from Lakeshore Staging and Design, a company I had never heard of, for a consultation and inventory removal assessment at my lake house address. Someone had paid them in advance to assess how to empty my home. Avery was not just planning to move in, she was planning to erase me. The air in my office felt heavy, suffocating. Just as I was processing the receipt, my desk phone buzzed. It was Jules, my receptionist. Jules is young, but she's sharp, and she has been with me for 4 years. She knows the rhythm of this place better than anyone. "Marjorie," she said, her voice unusually tight. "I just had a very strange call on the main line. A woman. She said she was the Hale family representative. She didn't use your name, or Mr. Ryan's, just the representative." Jules explained that the woman was demanding a block of 5 rooms for the coming weekend, complimentary. Jules, bless her, told the caller that all complimentary stays had to be approved by me personally. She got very cold. "Marjorie," Jules said. She said, and I quote, "This is very simple. When the property management transfers, which is happening any day now, those rooms must be held for my family. Just book them." "You did well, Jules." "What did you say?" "I told her the system was down for maintenance and I'd have to call her back," Jules said. Her voice, "Marjorie, it sounded just like Mrs. Hale." When I hung up, I felt a stillness I hadn't felt since my husband died. It was the terrible, cold calm of certainty. I run a business. At the reception desk, and in the booking agreement every guest signs, there is a very clear, legally compliant notice stating that calls to the main business line may be recorded for quality assurance. I went to the system log. I found the call. I put on my headphones and pressed play. And I heard her, Avery, that clipped, demanding Boston accent, attempting to use a corporate tone that didn't belong to her. "When the property management transfers," property management transfers. The phrase echoed. What transfer? I knew my next call. Ben, my local realtor, a man I'd shared coffee with for a decade. I called him, feigning interest in market values. We chatted about the weather, about the tourists. Then, casually, I asked, "Ben, have you by any chance heard from my son, Ryan, or his wife lately?" The pause on the line was deafening. "Marjorie," he said, his voice heavy with discomfort. "It's funny you ask. Your daughter-in-law did stop by the office last week. She said you were exploring options to give her power of attorney for the lake house, just for management purposes. You know, to lessen your burden. She wanted me to draft the forms." My blood turned to ice. "And did you—" "No," he said, too quickly. "It didn't feel right, but she was in a hurry. She actually left a draft copy in the printer tray. My assistant found it. It looked odd. Marjorie, the signature on it, it looked scanned. A draft. A forged power of attorney, left in a public printer tray." I hung up, drove to Ben's office, and retrieved the paper. I photographed it. Then I sent the image, along with the staging receipt and the audio file of her call with Jules, to Nolan Keats. Nolan, of Keats and Moreland, is not a family lawyer. He handles business litigation and hostile takeovers. He called me back in 20 minutes. "Marjorie," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "This is attempted fraud. It's clumsy, but it is malicious. I'm driving to Boston. I said, my voice shaking with rage. I'm confronting her. No, Nolan said, and his voice was so firm it stopped me cold. You will do nothing. You will not change your utility passwords. You will not call her. You will not alert her. People this arrogant and this sloppy always try to finish the job. You will let them walk right into the trap. We will be ready. So I waited. Nolan began drafting the temporary restraining order. I did. However, take 2 small precautions of my own. I changed the smart lock code on this house, the one she clearly did not have. And I had Jules temporarily block those 5 specific rooms at the retreat, locking them under an internal maintenance code. They were waiting. Empty. Avery's gaze darted from me to the door, which the process server was now rattling. She finally understood. This was not a social call. This was the trap. Sprung. This whole ugly night had been set in motion hours earlier. Not by the movers, but by a phone call. I was at the main desk in the retreat's lobby. It was just after noon. The lunch service was in full swing, and the room was humming with the pleasant energy of guests returning from morning hikes. Jules was handling a check-in when the main line buzzed. She picked it up, her expression bright and professional, which slowly tightened into confusion. She put the caller on hold, her hand cupped over the receiver. "Marjorie," she whispered. "It's Mrs. Hale. She sounds insistent. She's demanding I cancel a guest's reservation for this weekend. She says it was a booking error." "Which guest?" I asked, though I already knew. Jules looked down at her screen. It's you, Marjorie? The 5 rooms you blocked under your own name for maintenance? She wants them released to her. Immediately." I felt the familiar, cold click of the trap engaging. I nodded for Jules to transfer the call. I picked up the heavy desk receiver, and I made sure to speak clearly, my voice projecting just enough to be captured perfectly by the quality assurance system. "Hello, Avery," I said, my voice pleasant. "Jules says there's a problem with a booking." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by dead silence. She hadn't expected me. She had expected a low-level employee she could bully. Then, a click. She hung up. I didn't wait. I dialed my son. Ryan picked up on the 4th ring, his voice already tired. "Hey, Mom. I'm in a meeting." "No, you aren't. Ryan," I said. "You're in your car, driving here. Your wife just tried to illegally seize control of my business inventory. I want you both at my lake house in 30 minutes. We are going to have a talk." "Mum, she's just stressed," he started. 30 minutes, I said, and I hung up. They arrived in 25. I was waiting on the porch of the lake house, the one she now stood in. Avery got out of the car first. She didn't walk like a guest. She walked like a new owner who had found a squatter. She marched right up the steps, Ryan trailing behind her, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the gravel driveway. "This is ridiculous. Marjorie." Avery snapped. "No hello, no pretense. My family is driving up from Boston for the long weekend. They expect quality. I told them they would have the 5 best suites at the retreat. You will unblock those rooms." I remained seated in the wicker chair. "The retreat is fully booked. Avery." "Don't lie to me," she hissed. "Jules told me they are maintenance blocks. You can change them. I need them. We are using those rooms." "No," I said, simply. She tossed her hair, a gesture of manufactured frustration. Fine. If you're going to be difficult, we'll just stay here. This house is big enough. It's better, actually, more private. This house, I said, standing up, is still under my name. It is not part of the retreat. It is not yours. And it is also unavailable. She stared at me, her eyes flashing with a kind of hatred that was shocking in its purity. Then, like a switch flipping, her entire demeanor changed. The tension left her shoulders. Her face softened into a sickly, sweet, condescending smile. She took a step toward me, reaching out as if to touch my arm. "Marjorie," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Please, think about this. This is a huge opportunity for you. My mother knows people, very important people from Beacon Hill. If we host them properly, if they see this place," she gestured vaguely, "it would be a wonderful chance to promote your little business." Little business. The two words hung in the air, designed to diminish everything I had built. I looked past her, at my son, who was visibly wincing. Then I looked back at Avery. "My little business," I said, my voice just as quiet as hers. "Posted more revenue last month than Ryan earned in the last 3. I am not looking for promotion. Avery, I am looking for respect. You don't seem to have any." The slap of my words was harder than a physical blow. Avery's fake smile evaporated, but it was Ryan who reacted. He flinched, as if I had struck him. He looked at his wife's stunned, furious face, then at my cold, calm one. For the first time in their entire marriage, he did not defend her. He did not placate. He took a half step back, physically pulling his arm away from her sphere of influence. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Mom," he said, his voice rough, "can I talk to you alone?" Avery's face went white with fury. "Ryan, what are you doing? Get back in the car. We are leaving." He didn't look at her. He looked at me, his eyes hollow. "Mom, please." I nodded once, a sharp, single movement. "Go inside. Ryan, Avery, you wait on the porch." "I will not be told," she began. "Yes," I said. My voice was flat steel. It left no room for negotiation. "You will." She stopped, her mouth open, shocked into silence by the sheer force of my command. Ryan. His shoulders hunched in on himself as if he were walking into a gale, shuffled past me. He went into the kitchen of the lake house, the one he had apparently come to claim. I followed him in, leaving the door ajar. He stood by the granite counter, rubbing his face, refusing to meet my eyes. "Mum, you just don't understand the pressure," he mumbled. "I understand silence. Ryan," I said. My voice was low, but it vibrated with 8 years of suppressed frustration. "I understand what it means when my son stands by and watches his wife criticize my forks, then my clothes, then the business I built from scratch, and now, my home." I took a step toward him. "Your silence is not keeping the peace. It's a choice. It's a betrayal. It is louder than any insult she could ever scream at me, and you have been doing it for years." He finally looked at me, and I saw the desperation. "What am I supposed to do?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "If I push back, if I disagree with her on anything, she just shuts down. She won't talk to me for days. She packs a bag and says she's going back to Boston. She says I'm unsupportive, that I'm always choosing you over her." He was crumbling. I knew I had to keep pushing. "And what about you?" "Ryan, I asked. I walked past him to the large window overlooking the lake, my lake. When was the last time you were genuinely happy, not just at peace, because no one was yelling at you? I mean, happy. He was quiet for a long, heavy minute. I could hear his unsteady breathing. I don't remember. The admission hung in the air, pathetic and true. It was that promotion, he said suddenly, the words rushing out. At the firm? Last year? The one that came with the corner office? I turned. I remembered. He had been so excited. What about it? It required travel, he said, his face twisting. Maybe 2 trips a quarter, just to Chicago. She cried for 3 days straight. She didn't sleep. She said I was abandoning her, that I was selfish for wanting to build a career that took me away from her. She said I didn't value family. He ran his hands through his hair. I turned it down. Mum. I told my boss my priorities had changed. She didn't cry. Ryan, I said, my voice hard. Crying is a release. What she did was a performance. It was a tactic. It was manipulation. I just feel so... He choked on the word. I feel controlled. Every minute, every choice I make, every person I talk to. I have to calculate how she will react. How many days of silence it will cost me. I'm so tired. He had finally said it. The word that defined his marriage. I saw my son, the shell of the man he was, and the urge to tell him to light a match to his life and run was overwhelming. But that would be my turn to control him. I am not going to tell you to divorce your wife. Ryan, I said, my voice softening just a fraction. That is your decision. But I am requiring honesty, and I am setting boundaries. This stops. Her access to my life, my property, and my son stops right now. But I can't just... You. The door flew open, slamming against the wall. Avery stood there, her face a mask of pale rage. She had been listening. You did this. You've always hated me. You're trying to poison him against me. Avery, stop, Ryan said, but his voice was weak. A reflex. No, she's jealous. Avery advanced on me, her finger pointing. You're just bitter. You sold the one house that mattered, the house your husband built. The anniversary house, you sold it all because of your selfish ego, and now you're trying to keep this one from Ryan. The anniversary house. The old Albany apartment. I stared at her. He didn't build that house. Avery. And I didn't sell it for my ego. I looked at Ryan, at my son, who needed to hear this. Your father died in that apartment. He had his heart attack in the hallway, and I was the one who found him. I couldn't sleep there. I couldn't breathe in that air. I sold it because it was a tomb. The money I got. That money is the mud and the foundation and the roof of the retreat. It's the only thing that kept me alive. The truth landed with a thud. Avery actually faltered. For a split second, her self-righteous anger wavered, confronted by a grief she couldn't comprehend. But only for a second. People like her. They pivot. So what? She snapped, though her voice had lost its conviction. Fine. The retreat is yours. What about this house? The lake house. You have your business. You have your money. Doesn't Ryan deserve a place? Doesn't your son deserve something? Or are you going to hoard that, too? She thought she had me. She thought she'd found a new angle, a moral high ground. I almost smiled. Ryan deserves whatever he earns for himself. I said calmly. But this house, it is not his inheritance. It is not something he deserves. It is my private property, purchased with my own money 2 years ago. It is already an irrevocable trust. Avery, my will is settled, and you are not in it. And you are not in it. The words landed in the room with the finality of a gavel. Avery's face, which had been contorted in rage, went slack with genuine, unadulterated shock. She had been so certain of her right to my life. She had never even considered the possibility that I had legally fortified it against her. Ryan just looked at the floor. "You're lying," she whispered. "You're a bitter old woman, and you're lying." "Am I?" I said, just as the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, for the 3rd time. I walked past her. I opened my front door. The man standing on the porch was not a process server. It was Nolan Keats, my lawyer, his hair damp from the rain, his expression impassive. He held a thick, sealed manila envelope. The 2 young movers were standing awkwardly on the porch behind him, their cargo held hostage. "Marjorie," he said, nodding. He stepped past me, into the foyer, bringing the cold night air with him. His presence, the crisp lines of his suit, and the weight of his leather briefcase instantly changed the room from a family dispute to a deposition. "Who the hell are you?" Avery demanded, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. Nolan turned to her. He was not a tall man, but he had the kind of presence that made you stand up straighter. "I am Nolan Keats. I am Mrs. Hale's counsel." "You can't be here," she said. This is a family matter." "It stopped being a family matter, Mrs. Hale," Nolan said, "when you attempted to file a forged power of attorney. The draft, I believe, that you left in the printer at Ben's office. The one with my client's scanned digital signature." Avery went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then let's be clearer," Nolan said. He reached into his briefcase and took out his phone. He didn't even have to play the file. "I also have the recording of your call to the Hale Lakeside retreat, where you identified yourself as the Hale family representative and attempted to adjust the owner's private bookings. That is business interference. This," he said, tapping the manila envelope, "is fraud." Ryan finally spoke, his voice horrified. "Avery, you called the retreat. You told me you were just asking about dinner reservations." Avery ignored him. "This is nothing. It's a misunderstanding." "I agree," Nolan said smoothly. "And I think I know what the misunderstanding is. You've been under a great deal of pressure, specifically from your mother." Avery's head snapped up. "What?" "Melissa Sinclair," Nolan said, consulting a note. "Your mother, who, we've found, has been in direct communication with Mr. Hale's real estate broker, discussing the standardization of Hale family assets to, and I quote, elevate the family's social profile." This time, Ryan flinched. "My broker." My mother-in-law called my broker. "It seems, Mrs. Hale," Nolan said, his eyes fixed on Avery, "that you were not acting alone. You were simply the person on the ground, sent to do the dirty work." Nolan placed the large envelope on the granite counter. "This, however, is for you, from the court." He pulled out the document. It was stamped. Official. "This is a temporary restraining order, signed by Judge Miller at 4 o'clock this afternoon. It legally prohibits you, Avery Sinclair, and any of your agents, from transferring altering, accessing, or interfering with this property, or any of Mrs. Hale's personal belongings. He turned to the two movers on the porch, who were listening with wide eyes. That includes you, gentlemen. You are agents of a prohibited party. If you move one more item, you will be in contempt of a court order. That was all it took. The taller mover immediately dropped his end of my antique sideboard. That's it, man. We're done, he said to his partner. He walked up to me, holding his digital tablet. Ma'am, you are the owner. Right, Mrs. Marjorie Hale. I am, I said. We need your signature confirming you've released us from the contract. We're not getting in the middle of this. I took the stylus and signed my name. Thank you, I said. They tipped their hats and were jogging back to their truck in seconds. You can't do this, Avery shrieked. It was no longer a tactic. It was a raw, panicked scream. It was a mistake. I was arranging the utilities. I was trying to help. I didn't mean anything by it. Nolan, calm as a lake in winter, pulled another sheet from his file. Was the email chain to Vermont Electric to have the primary billing name changed to A. Sinclair also helping was the signed contract with Lakeshore Staging and Design to have your mother-in-law's furniture appraised and removed a mistake. Was scheduling the smart lock for a 5-hour window this evening so the movers could enter. Just arranging utilities. The room was completely silent. Every lie, every manipulation, every piece of her sloppy, arrogant plan was laid bare on my kitchen counter. Avery, defeated, did what she always did. She turned to my son, her eyes wide, her face crumpling into tears. She was no longer the commander. She was the victim, pleading for her protector. I watched Ryan. I watched him see his wife, stripped of her weapons, her treachery exposed not just by me, but by a neutral third party with a stack of evidence. He looked at her. He saw her. And for the first time in his marriage, he did not step forward. He did not reach for her. He did not shield her. He just stood there, his face ashen, and said nothing at all. Ryan's silence was the final blow. It was one thing to be exposed by me, an adversary. It was another to be abandoned by her husband, her partner in this domestic coup. Avery's manufactured tears turned real, a desperate, ugly sob tearing from her chest. She slid down the wall and sat heavily on the slate floor, her hands covering her face. Nolan, seeing his legal work was done for the moment, stepped back, becoming a silent witness by the door. I did not feel triumphant. I watched my daughter-in-law, the woman who had tried to steal my home, and I felt a profound, cold pity. Nolan's words about her mother, Melissa, had unlocked the last piece of the puzzle. I suddenly remembered a stray comment from years ago at their engagement party. Avery, flushed with champagne, holding up a glass to toast her perfect, untouchable older sister. This isn't just about you, is it? I said, my voice quiet. This is about Evelyn. Avery's head snapped up, her eyes wide and red, glittering with a fresh, deeper pain. Don't, she choked out. Don't you say her name. I heard your mother at the wedding. I continued, ignoring her. She never stopped comparing your dress to Evelyn's, your venue to Evelyn's, your husband to Evelyn's. You've been running a race you can never win. I looked from her to Ryan, whose face was a mask of confusion. This is what happens, I said, my voice resonating in the quiet room. This is the cycle of emotional violence. A mother teaches her daughter that her worth is conditional, that she must perform, and she must take, to be good enough. And that daughter grows up and repeats the pattern. She finds a man she can control, and she tries to strip mine the life of a woman who has what she was told to want: security, success, property. I looked directly at Avery. It stops here, tonight, or it continues, and you become your mother. That broke her. The last wall of her defense crumbled. You don't understand, she whispered. The words raw. I was ashamed. The first time you met my parents, you had dirt under your fingernails from that garden. My mother's friends. Their mothers. They don't work like that. I was so embarrassed. Ashamed, Ryan finally spoke, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Ashamed of her, I was ashamed of you. You made me cut off Elias. Avery looked blank. Who? Elias. My best friend since high school. The man who was supposed to be my best man, until you decided he was a bad influence. You said he didn't fit the image you wanted for us. You isolated me. I have no friends left. Avery, just your families. The room was heavy with all the unsaid, toxic truths. Nolan Keats looked at his watch, a silent reminder that this was not a therapy session. I would not humiliate her. There was no victory in that. This is all poison, I said, and it will kill you both. I looked at Avery. You need help, not from your mother. Professional help. Individual therapy. Then I looked at my son. And you need to find your spine. The two of you need couples counseling. Desperately. Mom? Ryan started. This is not a negotiation, I said, cutting him off. This is the path forward, if you want one. But let me be absolutely crystal clear. My property is not part of your recovery. This house, the retreat, my money, they are off the table. They are mine. These boundaries are now made of steel. You will never, ever cross them again. Avery wiped her face, her breath hitching. She was no longer a villain, just a broken, terrified woman. You don't understand, she whispered, echoing her earlier defense. But this time, the words meant something different. If I go back, if I tell her I failed, I am so afraid of failing my mother. I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up the useless, forged power of attorney. I held it up. Failure isn't disappointing your mother? Avery, I said. Failure is sacrificing another person's dignity to protect your own image. You failed tonight. The room fell silent. The movers were gone. Nolan was waiting. The only sound was the tapping of the rain on the windows. A quiet, steady drumbeat. The first part of the storm was over, but I knew Melissa was still on her way, and that storm was just about to make landfall. The silence in the kitchen was a cold, heavy blanket. Avery was still on the floor, a broken heap of ambition, and Ryan looked like a ghost. But the night was not done. My phone, resting on the granite counter, buzzed hard. It wasn't a call. It was a text message. I glanced at the screen. It was from Jules. It read, Marjorie. Black SUV with Massachusetts plates just pulled into your driveway. They didn't stop at the retreat. They came straight to you. They were here. Early. Avery's head snapped up at the sound of car doors slamming outside, a new and more primal panic on her face. Oh, God, she whispered, scrambling to her feet. That's her. That's my mother. Nolan, I said, my voice low and urgent. Stay by the door. I had anticipated this, even before I'd left the retreat to come here. I had made one last call. I had called Rob Whittaker, an old friend who owns the North Cove Lodge, a high-end competitor 2 miles down the lake. "Rob, it's Marjorie," I'd said. "I have a sensitive situation. I need your 5 best suites for this weekend, the Sinclair party. I'm paying for all of it. Put it on my account." I had already secured their exit. The front door opened without anyone knocking. Melissa Sinclair did not walk in. She made an entrance. She was a whirlwind of expensive wool, sharp perfume, and bone-deep disapproval. She was followed by a man I assumed was her husband, and a younger woman who radiated the same entitled chill, Evelyn, the perfect older sister. "Well," Melissa announced to the room, her voice like grinding glass, "this is cozy." She swept her gaze over my exposed beams, my fieldstone fireplace, my home. "A bit dark, isn't it? And what is that smell?" "It's that old house smell. We'll need to air this out immediately. I'll have the windows open all day tomorrow." She finally noticed the room's occupants, me, my lawyer, my son, and her daughter, who was desperately trying to wipe the tear tracks from her face. "Avery, what is going on?" Melissa snapped. "Why are you crying? And who are all these people? We're exhausted from the flight." "Mother, there's been a misunderstanding." Avery stammered. "A misunderstanding?" Melissa sneered. "I thought you said this was handled. I thought you said the house was ready for us. This," she said, turning her venom directly on her daughter, "was a simple task. Just secure the house. You can't even get that right." It was a public execution, a knife, twisted into Avery's deepest wound. "This house is not available. Melissa," I said, stepping forward. Melissa laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Marjorie, you're still here. Avery, I told you to handle this." "This house," Nolan Keats said, his voice cutting through her performance, "is legally secured by my client, Mrs. Marjorie Hale." He stepped forward, holding the signed temporary restraining order in one hand. "And this," he tapped the official deed on my counter, "is the title, free and clear, in her name. Your daughter was in the process of attempting to defraud my client when we arrived." "That is a slanderous accusation," Melissa hissed. "Is it?" I asked. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jules. "Marjorie, I found the other one. The call from 2 days ago. The one where she ordered Avery. Sending the audio file now." I looked at Avery. "This is your last chance. You tell your mother what you did, or I will." Avery just sobbed. I couldn't. I just... Fine." I had the file. I pressed play. I turned the speakerphone volume all the way up. First, we heard Avery's voice, small and nervous. "Mom, I don't know if I can just tell her to leave. It's her house." Then, Melissa's voice, sharp and cold as steel, filled my kitchen. "Don't be a child, Avery. It's simple. You get the power of attorney. You get the movers. You get that old woman out of that house before Friday. I am not having my weekend ruined staying in some tacky, provincial hotel. Do you understand me? Handle it?" The recording ended. The silence was absolute. Nolan was the only witness I needed. Avery was staring at the floor, destroyed. Ryan, however, was a different man. He was trembling, but it wasn't with fear. It was with a rage I had never seen. He wasn't looking at Avery. He was looking at his mother-in-law. She's my mother, he said, his voice dangerously low. The old woman you were trying to get out is my mother. Ryan, dear, this is just business. Melissa started, attempting to patronize him. No, he snapped. The word was a crack of thunder. It's not. I am your son-in-law. I am not your family's polishing project. You will not come into my mother's home and speak to her this way. You will not use my wife to commit fraud. We are done. Melissa Sinclair stared at him, finally seeing him not as an accessory, but as an obstacle. She composed herself instantly. The mask of civility snapped back into place. Fine, she said. This air is toxic anyway. Avery, Evelyn, we are leaving. She grabbed her purse. We will find a hotel. A real one. You'll have trouble, I said, my voice light. It's the first week of October. The foliage tourists have everything booked solid. She stopped, her back to me. However, I said, picking up a single sheet of paper from the counter. I took the liberty. You have 5 suites reserved at the North Cove Lodge, 2 miles down the road. It's very nice. They call it authentic luxury. I held the reservation confirmation out to her. Melissa snatched the paper from my hand. She didn't say thank you. She knew, and I knew, that I had just beaten her at her own game. I hadn't just evicted her. I had controlled her destination. She looked at Avery, who was frozen. Are you coming? Or are you staying here in this museum? Avery looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at the wall. Melissa sneered. Pathetic. She and her silent family swept out the door, leaving a vacuum of cold fury in their wake. The sound of the SUV tearing down the gravel driveway faded, and the silence that rushed in to replace it was heavy and absolute. The rain had softened to a mist, clinging to the windows. Nolan Keats, ever the professional, began packing his briefcase, his movements precise and quiet. Mrs. Hale, he said, his voice low. The restraining order is in effect. They cannot return to this property tonight. What would you like to do about the domestic situation? He gestured discreetly toward the kitchen, where Avery and Ryan stood like statues in a museum, frozen on opposite sides of the room. Give me a few minutes. Nolan, I said. Then I will need you to draft a stipulation, a set of terms. He nodded once, understanding immediately. Of course. He stepped back toward the foyer, giving us the illusion of privacy. I didn't want to be in the kitchen. I walked out onto the front porch, into the damp, cold air. Ryan followed me. He didn't take the chair next to mine, the one David used to use. He sank down onto the top step, his shoulders bowed, and put his head in his hands. We sat there for a long time. The only sound was the steady drip of water from the eaves. She was right, Ryan finally said, his voice muffled, not looking at me. About what you said, my silence. I waited. It wasn't keeping the peace. It was agreement. It was complicity. He scrubbed his face with his hands. Every time I let her criticize you, every time I just sighed and let it go, I was helping her. I was taking her side. I was helping her do this. Yes, I said. You were? I am so sorry. Mum, I'm not the one who needs the apology. Ryan, I'm just the one who demands the truth. We are going to have new boundaries. We will have dinner, once a week. Just you and me. You will not ask her for permission, because it's not her decision to make." He nodded, still looking at the ground. "Okay." His phone, resting on the step beside him, buzzed with a text. He ignored it. It buzzed again, this time with a call. He glanced at the screen. Avery. He pressed the decline button, silencing it. "Ryan," I said, my voice sharp. He looked up, confused by my tone. "You can't do that. You cannot silence her now. That is her move. You have to answer the call. You have to face the consequence of your new choice." He stared at me, then at the phone as it began ringing again. He took a deep breath, swiped accept, and put it on speaker. "What?" "Avery." Her voice was not the shriek from earlier. It was a thin, broken whisper, coming from the parking lot of the North Cove Lodge. I'm in the car." She wept. "I'm not going in with them. I don't know what to do. Ryan, I don't know how to be different. I don't know how not to be her." Ryan looked at me, his eyes pleading. "What do I do?" I took the phone from his hand. "Avery," I said, my voice firm, but not unkind. "This is Marjorie. You want to know how to be different. I'm going to tell you." She sniffled on the other end, a small, desperate sound. "There is only one path back from this, and it is not through tears. It is through action. Here are the terms. 1. You will call that staging company tomorrow morning, and you will pay their cancellation fee in full, from your own account. 2. You will write a formal letter of apology to be filed with my lawyer, admitting you attempted to access my property and accounts without authorization. 3. You will begin individual therapy immediately." There was a pause. Then Ryan spoke, his voice hard and clear, a tone I hadn't heard from him in years. "And, Avery, if this happens again, one more lie, one more manipulation, one more email, I am filing for divorce. That is not a threat. It is a decision. It is the consequence. Do you understand?" There was a long, terrible silence. Finally, just a small, "Yes, okay." "Come back to the house," Ryan said, and hung up. While we waited, my own phone buzzed. It was Jules, from the retreat. "Marjorie, I'm locking up. I'm going to swing by the lake house. There's something I need to give you." 10 minutes later, Avery's car pulled in, just as Jules's car arrived. Avery got out, her face pale, her eyes empty, and she walked past us, sitting down at the kitchen table. Jules came in, looking uncomfortable. "Marjorie." She held out her hand. In her palm was an old-style brass key, a spare I kept hidden in the retreat's office lockbox. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "Mrs. Hale. Avery," Jules said, her voice low. "She came by the front desk last week. She said you'd lost your spare and asked me to get this one for her. She said you'd approved it. I'm so sorry. I should have checked with you." I looked at the key. It was a small, petty deception, but it showed how deep the plan had run. Avery flinched, expecting me to explode. I just took the key. "It's fine. Jules, you did the right thing bringing it to me." I looked at Avery. "This is why the locks are already changed." I tossed the useless key onto the counter. "Nolan," I called, my voice ringing with finality. "She is ready to sign." Nolan, who had been drafting the agreement in the foyer, brought 3 copies to the table. It was a simple stipulation. Avery agreed to the 3 conditions. She agreed to pay the fees. She agreed to the therapy. She acknowledged the TRO. Avery took the pen, her hand shaking, and she signed all 3 copies. Ryan signed as a witness. The room felt like the pre-dawn air, cold, still, and braced for the real storm. The legal maneuvering was done. The emotional wreckage was, for the moment, contained. But Melissa Sinclair was still out there, 2 miles away, and she was not the type to accept defeat. I collected my copy of the agreement. I walked to my briefcase, the one Avery had ordered my furniture around. I placed the signed paper inside. I snapped the 2 brass latches shut. I turned, holding only one single, final piece of paper in my hand. Morning was coming, and I was ready for it. The sun had not yet burned the mist off the lake when the black SUV rolled up the driveway again. It was just after 9 in the morning. Ryan, Avery, and I were in the kitchen. Nolan was on his way. We had been sitting in a tense, exhausted silence. Melissa Sinclair did not bother to knock. She led her family husband and perfect daughter Evelyn straight into my home, their luggage still in the car. "We're back," she announced, as if returning from a brief walk. "We've decided the lodge is unacceptable. The thread count is questionable. We're going to do one final inspection here, and then we'll have our bags brought in. We'll make do." She was implying she would be staying. That last night was a temporary setback. "Avery," Melissa snapped. "Stop moping by the window and help me decide on rooms. Evelyn, you get the master?" I stood up from the table. "Melissa," I said, my voice calm. "Please, all of you, come into the kitchen. I have something I'd like to play for you." They followed, suspicious. I took my phone. I pressed play. And for the second time, I let Melissa's own voice fill the room. "You get the power of attorney. You get the movers. You get that old woman out of that house before Friday." I let the recording play out. Melissa's husband had the decency to look horrified. Evelyn just looked bored. "That's a recording." "Melissa," I said, "that has already been submitted to the court." Just then, Nolan Keats walked in. He had timed his arrival perfectly. "Good morning, Mrs. Sinclair," Nolan said. "All business." He placed a new document on the counter. "This is a petition we are filing this morning. It states that you and your party were fully informed of the temporary restraining order last night. Any further attempt to enter or inspect this property will be considered willful trespass and a criminal violation of that order." Melissa finally laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound. "You can't scare me with your little local lawyer. You think I don't know what this is. This is a shakedown. You don't have the money to fight me." I almost smiled. This was the moment. "You're right, Melissa," I said. "I don't. That's why the Hale Lakeside retreat does." She looked confused. "You see, 5 years ago, I established the Hale Lakeside Trust. It's a business entity. It's very well funded. And part of its annual budget," I said, nodding toward Nolan, "is a 3-year, fully funded legal retainer. My business is paying for this, and its lawyers have very deep pockets and a lot of time." The color drained from Melissa's face. She had been fighting a person. She had just discovered she was fighting a corporation. Ryan, who had been silent, stepped forward. He stood not next to his wife, but next to me, facing his mother-in-law. "Melissa," he said, and his voice was unrecognizable. It was deep. It was steady. "Avery and I will be staying at the North Cove Lodge, as my mother arranged. But I will be coming back here, today, to help my mother, Marjorie." take a full inventory of her property, to make sure nothing is missing. It was a declaration of allegiance. Avery, who had been invisible in the corner, looked at her husband's back. She looked at her mother's face, contorted with rage. And then she looked at me. She took a shaky breath. She walked to the middle of the room. I'm sorry, she said, her voice small but clear. She wasn't looking at Ryan. She was looking at me. In front of everyone. What I did. It was wrong. I'm sorry. She had done it. She had fulfilled the first condition. Melissa's face turned a shade of purple. Avery, get in the car. We are going home. Now. Avery looked at her mother. The lifetime of training, of obedience, of fear, was visible in her posture. She tensed. She looked down, and she did not move. It was the smallest rebellion of her life, and it was the only one that mattered. She did not obey. I picked up the last piece of paper from my counter, the one I had been holding since last night. This is a formal notice, I said, handing it to Melissa, who refused to take it. I placed it on the counter in front of her. It is a notice of revocation. It officially revokes any and all permissions, implied or otherwise, for any member of the Sinclair family to act as a representative for this household or its owner. From this moment on, any communication with me or my son will be through my counsel, Mr. Keats. I looked past Melissa. I looked at my daughter-in-law, who was still trembling, but had not moved. Her first choice, made for herself. I gave her the same words she had given me, but this time, they meant something completely different. You can leave now, Avery. It was not an eviction. It was a release. It was the end of her obligation to her mother's schemes. It was permission to start over. Melissa opened her mouth, a scream building in her throat, and the doorbell rang. I opened it. Standing on my porch was the local lake sheriff, his hand on his belt, his expression kind but firm. "Ma'am," he said, "we got a call from a Mr. Keats. Just here to confirm a court order is in place, and to make sure that any non-owners are peacefully vacating the premises." He looked past me, into the crowded kitchen. Melissa Sinclair was finally, truly, defeated. The door closed, very softly, behind them. The house was mine. The rain, I realized, had stopped. I put my hand on the cool, solid granite of my kitchen counter. It was a new day, and the lock, finally, was secure. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so glad to share these moments with you. I'd love to know where you're listening from, so please drop a comment below and share your own thoughts on this. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary and like this video. It helps us grow. And you can support us even more by hitting that hype button, so this story can be heard by more people who need it.